um, confession can become kind of a very unpleasant process because some guys feel like they're going there just to be saved, make sure I'm not going to communion with something on my soul as a matter of I want to go to confession. I want the graces. I'm there just out of self-protection. We see it all the time.
Wow. Yeah, and I think that's very common.
Welcome back, everyone. Craig and Jonah here today. We have a guest. We had some technical issues on StreamYard, so we went to backup plan and we're on Zoom. So hopefully the Lord can keep the internet flowing nicely for us for 30 minutes or so. So, uh, Father Robert Carr, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us about yourself, your parish, your radio show if you want, and then we'll start talking.
Sure. Well, I'm at St. Anthony Parish in Alston, Massachusetts. Also is a neighborhood of Boston, and we are on the Boston side of the Charles River. On the Cambridge side of the Charles River is Harvard University. So we're actually surrounded by the Boston campus of Harvard, mostly the business school. If you're familiar with public radio and you ever heard of WGBH, that's about maybe a half a block down the road or half a mile down the road. And I have a parish here. I've been ordained for 31 years, and parish here is in English speaking parish. A lot of a place for obviously the regular parishioners, and then we have students or graduates from the local universities. BU is nearby. BC is about 2 miles away. Boston College, Boston University, and so they're all in the area. And then we also have a Brazilian community, very live Brazilian community that's been here. I think it's the first Brazilian community, and we're of course in the Archdiocese of Boston.
And you've got a radio show of some sort that you put out. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, we actually do 10 shows a week,
Hmm.
and they're about 15 minutes a piece, but they're all podcasted on CatholicAudiomedia.com. And using Catholic Audio Media, look for the Voice of St. Anthony Parish on any of your podcast platforms. We the show has one that talks about usually the first reading, and the other show talks about different issues and things like that. So that's what I do. That's the program. So if anyone wants to tune it in, we'd love to have you. We're always looking for new listeners, and we're also airing on WROL 950 AM and WEZE 590 AM, 3 o'clock in the morning on WEZE and 3 o'clock in the afternoon on WROL. Those are not Catholic stations. Those are Christian stations. We're not on
Okay.
Catholic radio.
Okay. Well, that's great, and I'll link to all that below. Um, so I know your time is a bit at a bit of a premium, but you showed up in our universe here within the last, seems like within the last couple of months. You must have had the misfortune of stumbling upon one of our shorts or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you've been following some of our content, and in particular, felt like you had some input to add to some of the questions that we ask a lot, which really deals with natural law, the moral rules, forming our conscience as Catholics, particularly as Catholics using natural family planning or trying to follow the rules, so to speak. And so I wanted to kind of give you an opportunity if there's a particular thing that we've talked about or whatever that is kind of really close to your heart, you think you would like to address. I want to give you a chance to kind of take it away.
Sure. And also, if you have questions or
Hmm.
anything along the lines, I'd be happy to talk about them. But one of the things that this is one of the things I preach all the time. And one of the things that hit me was something you said where, this whole thing of just we're supposed to follow the rules, which we are. But that's something, what happens is you get a Catholicism where the whole point of Catholicism is to follow rules, but that's not the point of Catholicism. And this is a real struggle that a lot of Catholics have. And you've been kind of sharing that it's really something that's intensely struggle people are intensely struggling with.
Mhm.
And I think that is more an American form of Catholicism, even though Catholicism is Catholicism.
Mhm.
But been working for about 30 years with the Hispanics and the Brazilians, and their Catholicism is it's the same thing, but it's looked at in a different way. And so the concept of the focus on the rules is not so much you find there as much as the focus on having this relationship with God and really being very deep in our relationship with God. And that's that's literally what comes out of the Vatican and as well. So that's one of the things I said, this is one of the things I teach all the time. And I think you were saying that a lot of, well, we've even seen it. A lot of people are living in terror that if they're not following the rules, they're going to end up in hell. That's not what we teach as Catholics. And that's basically, it's a very superficial understanding of Catholicism. And what I wanted to do is kind of touch on some of the issues and say, well, where is this coming from, and how can we address it, and everything else.
Yeah, I don't I wonder what the different factors are that kind of it seems like there's this predictable um progression um of people that as you start to study this stuff and you start to learn more, you learn more and more, and it's almost like you get on this unavoidable slide into the rules, into scrupulosity that and I don't I think it's for a variety of reasons. I think number one, this is just a moral area that affects us on a just a constant
Mhm.
basis, much more than let's say the other moral obligations we have or the other Ten Commandments. This is just like right front and center
Mhm.
of most of our relationships on a regular basis. And two, there just seems to be more black and white rules, so to speak, as to distinct acts that I think for the most part, most of our moral life is a little more depends on the circumstances. It's a matter of degree. Drinking alcohol is not a sin, but if you do it to excess, it can be sinful. Like it seems like so much of our moral issues that we follow is a matter of degree, whereas here it's like like
Mhm.
depending on who you listen to,
Mhm.
if you do X
and
or you do
and that's
Y,
key.
I now have something tangible that I have to take to confession. I think is part of, and I don't know why that is. Why we seem if why the church seems to have developed, or people within the church seem to develop this fixation on sex and intimacy, um, and it lends itself to just these really black and white rules that are there is no discretion. It's like if you do this, it is intrinsically wrong, and it's a grave matter. It's not much of a leap to go become scrupulous about that because
Mhm.
now it's a grave matter. It's a distinct act. What do I do with that? I know we have a lot of people that struggle. How do I know if I've committed a mortal sin?
Mhm.
Should I go to confession just in case? Um, Confession can become kind of a very unpleasant process because some guys feel like they're going there just to be saved, make sure I'm not going to communion with something on my soul as a matter of I want to go to confession. I want the graces. I'm there just out of self-protection. We see it all the time.
Wow. Yeah, and I think that's very common here in the United States. I mean, like I said, Catholicism is Catholicism, but you saw the article I wrote. Actually, that's another thing I should tell you: CatholicAudiomedia.substack.com. And one of the things I really struggle here at first of all, keep in mind where I am. I'm surrounded by Harvard University.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
that has its own realities as well. And one of the things that I teach all the time, and I'm concerned that maybe because I teach it all the time, that's pretty much all I say. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, 2098. Let me see if I have it phrased exactly. Well, you cannot live the commandments if you are not in prayer. I think I have it here. Let me see. Nope, wrong one. But yeah, you cannot live the commandments if you are not a person of prayer. Prayer is an essential. That's what prayer is, an essential element to live the commandments. So what happens is people are focused on the rules because that's all people teach them. You look at all these people who are saying, if you do this, you're going to end up in hell.
Hmm.
Notice how many times they mention prayer, and it's
Yeah.
usually none.
Yeah.
And so, square one, the real question is, what is your relationship with God? I teach people all the time. We have to be people of prayer in our families, in our homes, etc., because that's what we've been called to do. And it's where you're in prayer that you bring all this to the Lord and saying, you know, okay, I'm having a struggle with this. I'm really having a hard time. How do we fix this? How do we deal with this? Um, I teach, if you're going through a really hard time, don't be afraid to turn around and say to the Lord, hey, I'm having a hard time here. But that means a relationship with God, which some people will say that's Protestantism. It's not. That's Catholicism. It really is.
Mhm.
You ask, Cardinal Sarah says it right in his books, and it really is, and the saints and everything. So that's where it starts. So we saw the article from the Register where
Mhm.
the person, and give him his due. It was a good article, but he's only got so much space to work with. And he said, if you commit certain acts, then you have to go to confession in order to go to communion. Well, first of all, he's not a priest, so he doesn't have this is what we do. Confession is a sacrament. It's more powerful than exorcism. Well, actually, 100 one confession is more powerful than 100 exorcisms.
It's
So when
amazing.
people say that's all a confess, you have to do that in order to go to communion, they've really given a short shrift to confession. And if and what happens in confession is you bring these questions to the priest, and he'll help you. The church clearly says, and Trent Horn says this too, that just what you say, there are levels of culpability on certain of these acts, and there are levels of culpability, but you need to work with your confessor, spiritual advisor, to understand how to deal with this. That's where this starts. So if we take all of that away, and all we have left is the rules, that's where it becomes a real problem.
Mhm.
You know,
My
and
my sense, and this is just more anecdotal from my own experience and talking to other people, is it it seems to me that most priests are much, what's the word I want to use here? Much more pastoral or empathetic about these situations within the context of a confession or spiritual direction. I don't know if they feel more comfortable advising people on an individual basis as opposed to getting up and making some broad declaration. And I get the hesitancy about speaking in a public way in the age of the internet, but I think that I share frustration sometimes because I have seen people go to certain priests and get one answer, and then I've heard people go to another priest and get a very, very different answer, an answer that is just, pr- let's say, technically correct, but just soul crushing for that marriage.
mm,
And so, what do you do with that? Like, is it just randomness? Do you priest shop? I mean, again, there's just so many things that people struggle with, do I accept this priest or am I just, you know, do I follow the catechism if they seem like they're in conflict? Those are real, and I know those are struggles that people have.
Well, one of the things is you know what the catechism says.
Hmm.
Um, if you're struggling with a sin, whatever the sin may be, know what the catechism says. And the catechism, okay, I make sure I say this right. There are moral rules that are laid out in the catechism. So if you consider that a standard, it's never going to go below the standard.
Hmm.
Okay. But it explains that there are certain ways that we have to live in order to live those moral rules. For example, it talks about friendship. It talks about understanding that prayer is essential. It talks about there are struggles in life. It talks about all this stuff. So it's not. It explains everything, but it's not a case of you failed and then therefore thank God you came to confession. Otherwise, if you got hit by a bus, you'd be in hell.
Yeah.
That stuff. And that's not what the catechism teaches. It,
Yeah.
you know, and that's not what the saints taught. And so as far as understanding, there were some priests that go one way and some priests go another. First of all, you obviously want the most accurate and pastoral answer.
Hmm.
And yeah, if, you have a right to go to the priest you prefer to go to. I don't know if you know that. So if someone says, well, you have to go to, no, you don't have to go to Father anyone.
Hmm.
You have a right to go to, that's canon law.
Hmm.
So that's one of the things. And you look for the priest who is giving you the answer that you can best, that is true, and that is maybe the most pastoral, so that you can do what the catechism, what the church teaches you to do.
Hmm.
So anyone who says, like, one of the things that I hear people are saying to someone who's going through a struggle during the abstinence period, you gotta suck it up.
Hmm.
You know what? We're not Marines,
Yeah.
right? I'm a Navy veteran.
Hmm.
Okay. So I am a veteran.
Hmm.
This whole, you gotta suck it up. Sorry. And I always love to tell this story, even though it's this little bit of a tangent. When I came out of the Navy, looking for a job, I went to a security guy, security company. And this guy in his whole camos and the whole bit, and he's, do this and the whole bit. And so I walk and I do the application. He looks at me and he asks for the the term for our release papers, our discharge papers, but he used the wrong words. And when I heard that, I went, "This guy's never been in the military, so I ain't working for him for all the money in the
Hmm.
world." And that's what kills me when you hear these people. You gotta suck it up. Well, were you ever in the military?
Hmm.
Because guess what? That's not the way we talk to each other in the Navy. And the Marines may, but I wasn't a Marine, and most of the people you're dealing with never in the military. So why are you talking to them like that?
Hmm.
You know?
Yeah, I think for a lot of people that answer is because what I hear often, well, life is not easy. Like carry your cross. That is part of the Christian life. And so you struggle to ask yourself, is this just are we just supposed to carry a heavier cross than we want to? But so what I tell people is this, even if you do something less than just sucking it up, it's not like marriage suddenly becomes this stroll through a flower field, whatever. Like you like parenting and giving your life to someone else and going to jobs and all that is demanding. Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
it's not like this is the only cross in your life, but it can
Mm-hmm.
it can create such an enormous weight on the marriage that a lot of people find themselves just in pure survival mode
Mm.
on a spiritual and physical and emotional level. And thriving seems like it's almost unachievable if you give for most people, if you give your full attention to quote unquote following all the rules. I think that has sort of been my observation. And I don't expect you to be able to resolve that tension, but it's just something that um after being married over 20 years, I
Great.
don't see it getting better anytime
That's for
soon.
sure.
So I think this is the way life is.
Well, do you mind if I ask the question?
Yeah.
How is your prayer life at home?
Um, Good. I mean, I can always be better, right?
Hmm.
You know, I'm kind of a rosary guy.
Hmm.
Um, I used to do the divine office and stuff too, but I have problems with Old Testament stuff. It causes me angst. The Old Testament God is hard for me to relate to sometimes. So prayers, prayer is a daily part of our life. We pray, do meals, but there's there's lots of people to do more.
And same here in our
Yeah.
house. So, like, we definitely pray as a family every night, and
Mhm.
I do try to go to Eucharistic adoration every day and pray the
Mhm.
Divine Mercy
Great.
Chaplet.
Yeah.
But
Great.
I was wondering too, what sort of advice would you give to a couple on when to go to confession, or how do you know when you should versus when you're just being scrupulous?
Ooh, well, it'd be good to work with your pastor on this. Like I said, I speak three languages, so I deal with people in confession in different ways. And I remember in one of my parishes, there was a guy who, every time I saw him, he'd ask me to go to confession.
Mhm.
In Spanish, to go to confession, you say confesarme. And that was his nickname. Oh, here comes confesarme every single time.
Mhm.
So I used to I when people are like that, I say no more than once a week.
Mhm.
Right, no more than once a week. It's really go to confession. Well, first of all, there's the one thing, go to confession when you feel you're in sin, which is true. Um, and but again, you don't go to confession because I have to check off the box in order to go to communion. It's like, okay, I'm in sin. I'm going to go to the priest and confess. Um, and generally, I know Cardinal O'Malley, who's right now, unfortunately, our outgoing cardinal, but we'll see who the new guy is, how he is.
Mhm.
He suggested every 6 weeks and all that. And technically, according to the rule, here's one of the things that maybe I should touch on the other side. COVID was a horrible thing, but it was great for teaching out about the Eucharist. It was
Mhm.
fascinating. Okay. Um, Part of people going to confession is debating whether or not to go to communion.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So that's something to work with your pastor and stuff if you want. But um, if you don't feel that you are able to go to communion and you choose not to, that honors God too, because you're saying I'm not ready yet. And
Mhm.
but bring that to prayer as well. And so that's important to understand the both sides. So if you feel that you really should go to confession before you go to communion, understand what confession is.
Mhm.
It's more than just something. And go to confession. Go to someone that you respect as a priest that you feel is going to give you a correct answer.
Mhm.
One of the things that I've done in confession is to have people read the catechism on whatever their major sin that they're confessing, so that they have an understanding what it says. Just so you know.
Do you think can a Catholic go to the catechism and talk about, I guess, the current catechism, not, let's say, not
Mm-hmm.
the older Baltimore catechism, but
Can I stop you for a second?
yeah.
Stay away from the Baltimore catechism. Okay,
I'm not a fan.
that's gonna get a lot of people upset for saying that. The
Yeah.
Baltimore Catechism was originally designed for basically school
Yeah.
and the early grades of school, and
Mhm.
people use it today. It is not a Vatican document.
Mhm.
Um, and I say this on the radio all the time. You can tweet every question and answer in the Baltimore Catechism. You literally can. And the problem is that's a very superficial. Our faith is profound, so it's a superficial answer. So maybe for the early grades, yes, but for adults, you shouldn't,
Mhm.
because it's not. You need something deeper than that.
Yeah.
There is a. I don't know if you ever heard of the UCAT.
Mm-mm.
Okay. You can talk to. you heard this from me. You can go to your pastor and ask him why you don't know about the UCAT, why you don't know about the UCAT.
Okay.
The UCAT was distributed at a World Youth Day. It was put out by during the time of Benedict the 16th. He wrote the introduction, and it is a catechism that I use for kind of RCIA, give people the basic understanding. You can check that out, and also the Catechism of the Catholic Church. You can find it on the internet on the Vatican webpage. Go to resources, and then you'll see Catechism of the Catholic Church, and you can look through that. And of course, you can buy it at a bookstore. And the Catechism of the Catholic Church builds upon the Catechism of Trent, the Council of Trent. So it doesn't cast away Trent; it builds upon it. There are some people will say, "Well, I'm only going to read the one from Trent." Well, good for you. Nothing in the Council of Trent has been discounted, except it teaches that the sun and the moon revolve around the earth.
Mhm.
That's the one thing. But aside, because it was in the 1600s.
Yeah.
But that's still valid. But the Vatican II actually enhances it even more. So I don't know if so I stopped you at the Baltimore Catechism, so I didn't get to answer your question.
Yeah. So it seems to me as a non-theologian, non-professional theologian or whatever, that the catechism ought to be a place that Catholics can go and get enough information to form their conscience and act accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a fair assumption right there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because you've seen some of our episodes where we've found speeches that Pope Pius XII gave in 1952 to midwives that talks about things in a much more detailed way than the Catechism does, and so you actually, am I supposed to listen to Pius XII? And and of course there's footnotes in the Catechism and stuff, but to what extent, if any, does a Catholic need to go above and beyond the Catechism to form their conscience and be able to go through life and be confident that I'm living my life the way the Lord wants me to?
Oh, the Catechism. Look at it this way: that speech that came from Pope Pius XII
Mm-hmm.
would have been included, at least consulted, in the answer they give in the Catechism.
Seems like it, yeah.
So, so for example, I'm reading an answer in the Catechism, or I'm reading a statement in the Catechism. I will see some of the footnotes, and I'll go and, oh yeah, but I'm a theologian,
Mm-hmm.
so I can go back and go, oh yeah, I understand what this is. Whereas what you have is the main thing. You may want to go through the footnotes, but you don't have to follow the footnotes, because everything that the footnotes are referring to is already in the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you have deeper questions, talk to someone who can help you.
Yeah. That being parish priest.
Parish priest, or,
Yeah.
and it's important to understand to do that. And, just as you want to have, you take that as an answer, you can also look in the UCAT too. You take that as an answer. Be careful of the people online who you listen to, right? Because you don't know, they may be quoting Pope Pius XII,
Mm-hmm.
saying this is what Pope Pius XII said, but
Mm-hmm.
the answer that's in the Catechism will include that and everything else that comes from Catholic tradition, and work it down to this thing, and so into this answer. And therefore, you might say, well, Pope Pius XII said that, but really everything we need to know is right there in the Catechism.
So I guess, what it all boils down to is mortal sin rare or is it common? Because I don't think when you get down to whether people have full knowledge and full consent, I kind of think it's rare to have both full knowledge and absolutely full consent. But if you listen to the scrupulous side of things, or the ultra traditional side of things, then it's very easy to sin in a mortal manner. I was just wondering what you thought.
You hear that right across the board. And part of that is, in the previous years, you had this delineated difference. This is a mortal sin. This is a venial sin. If you'll notice, the terms are not necessarily the same in the Catechism. They're more or less grave matter, great serious matter, because there are 3 conditions, as you know, to commit a mortal sin. Someone actually added there's actually 4, because some people will go through the 3 and not commit the sin, but forget they didn't commit the sin, and then think I'm in mortal sin, and they talk to a priest and go, "Wait a minute, you never committed the sin," So because that's that thing that happens.
Mhm.
But so you look at the the situation, how what were the circumstances behind it and everything. And maybe a good way to put it, and I don't mean this as a rules way, when in doubt, go to confession.
Mhm.
Right. So if you don't, one bishop once said to me, "When in doubt, cross it out," which is an idea. I mean, don't let this stuff. Here's a good rule to keep in mind, and you have to be careful because you don't want this to uh, undermine confession. Okay. St. Alphonsus Liguori, doctor of the church, said, he's the one who also wrote, very prolific writer back in the uh, 18th century. He died the year our Constitution was ratified. We lived in Europe. Said, when the minute you are sorry for a sin, God forgives you. You still have to go to confession, but he says that. So the whole thing of, well, I'm going to be hit by a bus and die because I didn't make it to confession, he basically says, no, no, you're sorry for the sin, but there's never, when in doubt, go to confession. So if you're not sure you committed a mortal sin, um, you can you work it out what you feel is the best thing to do, and when in doubt, go to confession. Is that and the priest will guide you through that. He'll say, well, really, uh, and that's what the Catechism says, to work with your priest or spiritual advisor to help you how to understand what it says, the levels of culpability. The priest. So the days of, if I did, I commit a mortal sin, what if I do, and then if I no, that's and that's a lot of that black and white stuff that the Catechism does not teach. It teaches what is grave matter, the whole bit, and helps you through it. But now, by the way, just as a quick example, just a quick thing to say, this is why I don't like the Baltimore Catechism. How long did it take me to give that answer?
Yeah. Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. What would you say? Because I know we get this question a lot. There are things that are, let's see, quote unquote, grave matter, but someone through either their own self-reflection or maybe even being advised by a priest said, this is not a sin, or I don't even believe this is wrong. Like, it's not even that I don't want to do this, or I'm in a state of weakness and I do it. Like, in my soul, I feel convicted. This can't possibly be wrong for me.
Like the primacy of conscience.
Right. The element of conscience, which is, I think, something a lot of us Catholics really struggle what to do. Can the conscience, for example, well formed, essentially permit me to do things that, let's say, black letter law says you can't do that? And what do you recommend people do in that circumstance? Because they will go to confession despite their conscience, because they're like, well, what if my conscience is wrong? What if I am wrong and the black letter law is right, and I'm just so weak or whatever that I can't see it, but intellectually it feels dishonest to go to confession because I'm confessing something that I deeply believe is not wrong, and I don't think I committed a sin at all. But you get into this kind of a different type of scrupulosity. Can you offer any, I guess, words of encouragement or recommendation for those folks?
Sure. Well, one of the first things, I think at that point, it's important to be able to talk with a priest who you trust and respect, that is going to give you the most accurate answer. And you want to form your conscience correctly. remember, one of the levels there is levels of culpability. So it's not so much the question whether this is a mortal sin or a venial sin, but then there is the question whether it is a sin at all.
Yes.
Definitely work with your pastor on that and help him do it. You want to be careful of saying, well, I figured out this is not a sin, even though the church says it is. Again, we're talking levels of comp. So, it's not like, again, if I get hit by the bus, I'm going to hell. But it's very easy to step from there to go through a whole bunch of things that all of a sudden, well, that's not a sin either. Well, that's not a sin. So work very carefully with if you can. Where are you guys located, by the way?
Midwest.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Because as you know, I'm in New England. So, so that would be the best thing. And now you're taking all the steps to make sure you have the most accurate answer, not just I have decided. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people really struggle with. And I'll say from my own personal experience, these when it gets into these kinds of moral dilemmas, when it, on a very intimate and personal level that involve not just me but my wife, I find it difficult to go to confession and seek spiritual advisement from a parish priest who sees us, knows my wife, knows our kids. Um, I that's maybe I'm just a big baby or whatever, but I like to have a little step removed when seeking that kind of moral advice. And I don't know if that's the
Absolutely.
right way or not.
No, absolutely. For exactly that reason. You know him, you see him every day, the whole bit. And you may not want to be, absolutely. Are there any order priests in your area?
Yeah, they're very conservative. They're very traditionalist, Latin mass and all that.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah,
which
I
I don't have a
mean,
problem with that, but I've been through that too. And
yeah.
that
Well, what about some other orders? Do you have like Benedictines, Franciscans?
I don't think so. We used to have a monastery nearby that would be really handy, but it's pretty much diocesan priests, which
Oh,
is,
okay. All
so
right.
it's really hard. Like this feels like something that you need to do more than just stop in for a weekly confession. Like you need kind of almost a spiritual direction or an ongoing relationship with the priest to really unpack what's going on. And that's I find that hard to do, especially as a busy dad and all that kind of stuff. And the priests are rotating around and they're busy. It's hard to do.
In fairness, when I did go to that Latin, the very traditional Latin mass priest to bring up these issues, it wasn't a black and white answer. They were much more considerate than maybe, what I expected, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Good. Well, that's what I'd suggest. To just if you can, I mean, you can bounce it off your pastor, but like you said, you'd like to find someone. Are there any other parishes in the area?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I do. It adds a level of difficulty in getting to confession, for example, when I have to travel 30 minutes and get their confession.
Yeah.
Like I don't know that, and that's and that I have found it. I've never found it easy to have these kinds of confessions and moral discussions with my pastor. I wish it felt easier than that, and maybe that's just, but so it does add a layer of complexity for people that are already busy and how do you do that? I guess maybe just make it more of a priority, but
you can't do confession this way, but you can also, but for some kind of basic advice, you can use the phone. You can give a call or even, things like that. But, yeah, again, dealing with your pastor, you have a different relationship with your pastor. if you can see around here, we actually have a lot of parishes and
Mhm.
everything else. So,
Yeah.
if there is a way to talk to another priest who you think would help you well, I think that's what I would suggest. Just because this is how you feel, you don't want to. Um, Again, you don't want to say, "Well, I've considered this," and that can. But you want to make sure you bounce it off with someone who can help you make sure you're working this correctly.
Hmm.
You know,
For sure. Okay.
does that help?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, this is hard stuff. Like, this is
It
really,
is.
I had
It
no
is.
idea this would be such a difficult moral process to go through. And I guess constantly go through. Maybe eventually I get
Well,
old enough, but
one of the things is to keep in mind that not only are we called to be merciful with others, we're called to
mhm,
be merciful with ourselves.
that's hard to do.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's true. That's true. So what, the bottom line is, um, well, let's talk about hell for a minute. Just
Hmm.
if you look at what the church teaches, who goes to hell, you really, it's not people who make a mistake, right? It's people and it's people who have said, I reject God. I don't care. I don't want his mercy. I don't want to. So if someone commits like the unrepented mortal sin, well, it's not someone who accidentally didn't repent. It's someone who says, no, I refuse to
Hmm.
repent.
Hmm.
And there is nothing you can do to change that.
Hmm.
Many people may not like that, but they may not have met such people. Um, and yes, it's so you that's the thing to keep in mind. You don't accidentally go to hell, right? It's really the key word is obstinate.
Yeah.
You're like, no, no, I'm and where I'm here in Massachusetts. The Divine Mercy Shrine, the first one outside of Poland, is about 2 hours away, and that's one of the things that Saint Faustina used to say, that God really gives you every chance possible to repent. And if you think about Catholics, right, you have the other Christians. We have heaven, purgatory, and hell. Well, 2 out of 3 are going to get you into heaven. The others only
Hmm.
have 2, right?
Yeah. Right. Right.
So the church is really saying, no, the Lord is doing everything he can. So understand it that way. You don't accidentally commit a sin. God, one of the things I teach here, God is not a computer.
Hmm.
All right. It's not, dot, dot, dot. And I used to fix sonar computers in the Navy, and they're very, it's all logic. So black and white. God is not a computer.
Hmm.
I hope that helped.
And that makes perfect sense to me. But this is where I wonder what the role of sort of the philosopher is supposed to be, because you will invariably hear, well, God is also perfectly just, and so God must like I don't know. The philosophy, I think, in the natural law and the philosophy and all that, seems like it serves a purpose, but it feels to me like sometimes it takes on a life of its own and really interferes with that type of message, because I don't. What do you make of a God that is that is perfect justice and perfect mercy, or whatever, however you want to say it? Because depending on who you ask, they're like, well, God, yeah, a lot of souls probably go to hell because God is perfect justice too. Like, how do you like just separate that? Like, how do you just ignore that? Like, it's really hard. I mean, I think it's one thing to say, yes, God's mercy and all that makes sense to me, but I only get one crack at this. I don't really know what the score sheet looks like until I die, and by then I don't have a chance to go back and fix it. Like, even if there's a slight chance that I should be more scrupulous and God is more critical than we want, when eternity is on the line, that's a big stake. Like, I think for me, that's where I struggle to completely let go of the scrupulous side of things, because I'm like, the stakes are so high. Even if there's a small chance that I'm wrong or you're wrong or whoever's wrong, it's the stakes are just so huge.
That's computer thinking, right? It is.
Mhm.
It's computer thinking.
Mhm.
Um, think of what Jesus did on the cross.
Mhm.
Okay, he did all that, and Saint Augustine teaches if you were the only one living on the earth, he would have done that to save you. So he did all that to ensure that you get into heaven.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, yes, God is just. There are people that always come out with that side. Yes, that's just, but he's doing everything he can to see to it that you get into heaven. So, um, always realize there's grace working to lead you, and there's all these things working to lead you into heaven. And they are at your, they are at your fingertips, so to speak. Bishop Athanasius Schneider, uh, who is very much on the traditional side, but one of the things he teaches that I found fascinating is, always make use of your guardian angel, always, and definitely, pray and ask for assistance. So there is so much in play because of the grace of God to see to it that you get to heaven. That other side there, again, that goes back to, it's, you can't accidentally do this. God is doing everything he can. Let me give you one of the mechanics of how heaven hell works as far as judgment. All right. um when the devil, will make this scenario, the devil is the accuser, so he lists all the bad things that you have done, bah, 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 bah. And you have this relationship with God, you're trying to do your best, and basically what God says, yes, you're right, he is guilty, but I forgive him, therefore case closed. And that's how it works. And the people who reject God, they don't have any recourse, right? But that's not what you're talking about here. The people who reject God, it. We had someone told me they went to a give an anointing, and the person, nope, nope, last rites didn't want it, and then put in their bulletin, in their obituary, how much they wanted nothing to do with God.
Mhm.
Bah, bah, bah. Well, there you go, right?
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
we could continue this, and maybe even if you want to do it again, maybe get into more specific cases and stuff. But I hope I gave a better understanding of it. All begins with prayer and trusting. That's the thing, trusting that the Lord is doing everything he can to get you into heaven.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's helpful because I know that the people that kind of follow us and engage with us are people of good intent. Like
Mhm.
they genuinely want to love God. They love God,
Mhm.
and they find certain aspects of this to be just a really difficult cross or just an impediment to all that. And you go online too much, and it's just all you hear is just the judgers and the accusers, and it is really hard to just completely shut that out and say, nope, this I have confidence that this is the church is right here, that despite my failings, God's mercy is there for me as long as I'm constantly oriented to him. But it's hard to just keep going through life and constantly reminding yourself of that because it's a slog.
No, and I think that for me personally, I would rather love God for all of his goodness and love him even more for his great mercy than just live a scrupulous life where
Mhm.
you just
Yeah.
are constantly anxious.
Check all the boxes. Yeah.
I think, was it Saint Teresa of Avila said, I have more fear of people who have a fear of hell than I have of hell.
Mm.
Yeah. So yeah. Do you do any spiritual reading?
Not not a lot right now, but I have not recently.
Okay.
Do you recommend anything though?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Tons. Um, how about The Way of Perfection by Saint Teresa of Avila?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have read, and I probably about 5 or 6 times, New Seeds of Contemplation by Thomas Merton.
Oh, okay.
Um, I mean, there's just tons of stuff. Um, I have a Kindle, so I have a lot of my spiritual How to Converse with God by Saint Alphonsus Liguori. Notice a thing here, Saint Thomas Mer's not a saint, but
Mhm.
um there's just tons of stuff, but that's a starter. I definitely would consider something like The Way of Perfection.
Mhm.
And she has this real she's famous for having this deep relationship with God. And you may have heard the story. She was riding on her horse one day, and she lived in Spain, and she got knocked off the horse and landed in a mud puddle. Did you ever hear this story?
This one says about how many friends you've got or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like
This
that.
is it's just this is what I
Okay.
do to my friends. And she tells God, and says, "Yeah, that's why you have so few."
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I love that one. I
But you
love that
see
one.
that humor, that
Yeah.
real deep relationship with God. And maybe that's one of the things to really look at, some really good. And there's one thing, you don't have to get into specifics with your pastor, but ask him for some good spiritual reading.
Mhm.
That's important. And definitely buy a UCAT, right?
Okay. Yeah, actually, and if you think of other good spiritual works, because we do guys and ladies, but most of the guys will ask us if we have any. We've been thinking about doing some group stuff together, like finding one, reading, and getting online and just chatting about it. So we appreciate those suggestions, and if
Oh,
you
great. Sure.
think of something in an hour from now, shoot me an email and
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
circulate that because it is helpful to have something like that above and beyond prayer, but something you can read that helps, doesn't just send you on a path of scrupulosity, whatever.
And not only that, the people a long time didn't write a lot.
Hmm.
So they're kind of short,
Hmm.
their chapters.
Yeah,
So yeah, yeah,
that's good. That's
yeah. So
That is
yeah,
what
I'll
I
definitely
need.
find some more and send them your way.
okay. Well, I know we've taken a lot of your time, Father, and you're busy. I hope we can do it again. I would love to have you come back and talk more specifics about, whether it's some of the natural law or maybe even some of the sections on the Catechism, if you're up for that, because
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
these
Sure.
are these are some of the specific things that I know people wrestle with on a very, very real way that it would be helpful to get your input on that.
Sure, absolutely. You will shoot me an email and we'll work something out. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Father. We appreciate your time. We really enjoy this. Thank you, Jonah. Thank
You
you,
bet.
everyone, for listening. And until next time, everyone,
Bye.
have a good one.
Have a blessed day.
Yeah, go ahead.
CatholicAudiomedia.com.
Okay, we'll put all that in the description below if people want to come find you. Okay.
Great.
Thank
Thanks a lot.
thank you, Father.
Take care.